Good evening. Thank you again for being here. I know it must be very hard to be in the classroom and just to come to these talks in the evening. For me, this is my first time, so please bear with me if I just I am learning my way. This evening, in 20 minutes, I have just laid out what I want to do. I would be introducing a little bit about magic and religion. So, and start with my own personal experience and how this magic and religion, the separation has developed, and in the present context, how that kind of magic and religion, they intertwine, they could be, that kind of, this difference could be more in the naming and could be more a kind of an artificial divide, which is very random. That's what I will be focusing on. So let me start with a personal anecdote. When I was growing up in India, in a Hindu household, I watched my mother, first thing early in the morning, she will wake up and she will take a bath, wear clean clothes, and first thing coming out of the bathroom, wearing fresh clothes, she will bow down before a basil plant. So she will put incense stick, she will put a little an oil lamp, and she will bow down before the basil plant before going to her altar, where all the gods and goddesses were there. So, and the basil plant in the front yard. I did not know why she did that. And when I when I asked her while growing up, she said, basil plant, which is known as tulsi plant, is the consort of the preserver of the universe. So that's the reason why, without her permission, I would not go to her spouse to worship him. So that was my introduction to the Hindu practice. And also, when I had my first child, my mother-in-law was visiting from Varanasi, the the city known as the most religiously profound, the city, the holiest city in the world, that meant from a Hindu point of view. So when she was visiting, she brought a special gift for my mother. It was a piece of black stone, and with tremendous care, affection, respect, reverence, she gave it to my mother, saying, Samuduni, this is the traditional way to address, so please take care of this divine. So this is the divine and it grows. And so never forget to take care, never forget to worship this, the divine being. So being brought up in a Hindu household, that the plant, the stone, the cow, and all these have been looked upon as divine and have been worshipped as part of the ritual. So with this, that I did not know that how these would be, these different beings were constructed as a religion. So while that I studied religion, and I wanted to make sense of what's how religion as a concept has developed, I noticed, I observed that this whole definition, the difference between magic and religion has been a a Western, part of the Western experience and cosmology. That if we see that magic as separate from religion and science as conceptualized in hierarchical order, that goes back to the post-Enlightenment period. So that means growing up in the Hindu household, that there was no separation between what's magic and religion. That everything, that all these different things and beings are divine and they would be worshipped, and the divine existed everywhere, and the divine would be worshipped in different ways, and there was no wrong or right way. So that's very interesting to think about. So, but what is the difference then? This magic and religion, magic as lesser than religion, and of course science, a completely different concept. So we could see that this sort of hierarchization, that how it must have been kind of developed in the Western cosmology, because definitely looking at it from the scientific point of view. We really need to think about science as rational, science as reasoning, science as objective. So whereas magic, that is random, magic as irrational. If we go back to Sir James Frazer in the kind of late 18th century, we can see that his famous book, The Golden Bough, 12-volume text, which has been used as a kind of bedside reading by many Western intellectuals, developed this notion of magic as the bastard sister of religion. So that means that you could see that magic as random, magic as something lesser, and magic as irrational. So this notion that which has been taken up, this is 1894, and we see that in the 19th century that many of these thinkers who are known as the great social scientists, like Emil Durkheim, Max Weber, and of course Sigmund Freud, among others, we see that how they have looked at kind of magic, religion, and science in a hierarchical order. And this model must have been taken up by the early anthropologists. I am an anthropologist. So by early anthropologists who have been very Western trained and Western situated anthropologists in the early 20th century, those who studied the non-Western societies, right away they could see that these non-Western societies, whether it's the indigenous people in Mexico or the Trobriand islanders in the kind of in the Trobriand island, or the New Guineans or Australian Aborigines, or the Hindus worshipping 330 million gods and goddesses. So when they studied the non-Western cultures, right away they used that sort of kind of typology, that sort of hierarchization, in order to look at the non-Western people as non-rational, as lesser, as also, of course, religious, from the scientific point of view. So that so far I'm making this argument that kind of how this development must have kind of started, what's the background. So just to give you one example, to see the difference between magic, religion, and science as a different concept. So can you all hear me? Yeah, thank you. So just to give you one example, that in the early 20th century, that Malinowski, that we know Bronislaw Malinowski, a Polish anthropologist who studied the Trobriand islanders. Here he writes this beautiful book called The Magic, Science and Religion. He makes this interesting observation. He says that the Trobriand islanders, they are engaged in magic only when they do the deep water fishing. But when they are doing shallow water fishing, they do not do any ritual. So they use magic as a kind of, in order to incur power. So that kind of by invoking the spirits. So that's where he makes the difference. Magic is a means to an end, whereas religion is an end in itself. And imagine that he's talking about that's going to the deep water fishing. The Trobriand islanders are engaged in magical ritual. Interestingly, much later we find that even kind of, I can just give you another example among the Hopis. Are you familiar about the Hopi people? Hopis in the southwest, Hopi and Zuni and Navajo. So among the Hopis, that Hopi people, they would invoke their kachinas in order to plant corn. So planting corn, so that's where kind of they would be doing the ritual and using the corn powder and just do their dance to plant the corn, even for the harvest. So why that is not called magic? That kind of to think about, which kind of they do it for their own sustenance, that they would be, and then without corn, they would not exist, or they would not be sustained. So interesting that Malinowski calling the Trobriand islanders deep fishing as magic, whereas for the Hopi people, calling their kachina for kind of their corn is considered their religious ritual. So what I want to emphasize that kind of how this magic religion, how it's kind of this dichotomy has been used in a very random way. Random kind of you can see think about, and later anthropologists that they would be absolutely they would not worry about making this distinction. I just finished reading a very interesting book called The Ethnographic Sorcery by Harry West, and he studies the people of Mozambique, and here he says ethnographic sorcery. He says sorcery is used as a language by the people, not magic, not religion, but used as a language. So you can see interestingly how anthropology is also developing, and we are becoming much more inclusive, because now we are hopefully we are kind of going away from this whole 19th, 20th century thinking of the separation. Rather, we are becoming much more influenced by the knowledge system, that knowledge growing not just in the West, also the knowledge that we are dependent on coming from the non-Western world. So that's we need to think about. So now talking about this kind of this magic science, that kind of where do we draw a line, that we see that, and why this difference, that kind of, and why this difference also is so paramount, that think about that now in the kind of we see in the with the development of the modern nation state, that post 20th century, that kind of now, and post-colonial nation state, there has been so much of emphasis on these monotheistic religions. That monotheistic religions like Christianity, of course Judaism, Islam, these religions are very text-based. That the text, that kind of very much like Kitabi, text-based, and they are also prophetic religions. And in the monotheistic order, that there is no room for any other way of constructing the reality that we need to think about. So, and with this emphasis, with the kind of predominance of the monotheistic religions in the secular modern new nation state, we see that religion has become a kind of a personal affair. Religion is personal, individual. Religion is deeply kind of very much individualized, whereas in politics is being separate. Politics public is considered kind of very much as secular. So the monotheistic religions, you can just, I wanted to emphasize that the emphasis on a vertical notion of the construction of the divine and human nature and animals. Vertical. Think about it. God, then God creates the human beings in the image, in His image. Then, of course, animals are created for the use of human beings, and then nature at the bottom. So, if you look at this kind of the vertical order, but if you look at there in many other societies, many other cultures which do not go by this vertical notion of the construction of divine and the human. So many other cultures, like let's say the indigenous people in different parts of the world, or the kind of the Native Americans here in the USA, Hindus, or if we can take the example of many Southeast Asian cultures, there the divine, human, animal, nature, they all are constructed on a horizontal order. They are all interrelated, interconnected. We really need to think about. So that's where there is no separation between magic, religion. And to the extent even religion is given a scientific explanation. For example, I can give you this example of the Hindu astrology, that it is the placement of all the planets, that how they are given a kind of a scientific explanation of where kind of the day, the moment, the kind of the time I was born, it determines how my life is going to be. just to think about. So that's kind of another giving this scientific explanation. So I know that kind of, maybe I have 5 more minutes. So 2 minutes? There. Okay, 3 minutes. So I just would like to summarize that in the multicultural setup today, in the kind of globalized world, and in also much more kind of the new ageism, I see that there is so much of emphasis now on this kind of these religions coming from different parts of the world. For example, I'm showing you these pictures, that these pictures here depict that the people, the women of the Indian diaspora living in Los Angeles, here they are becoming the religious specialists. So they are playing the role of religious specialists. They are taking up, they're embodying the feminine divine and worshipping the goddess Durga. So you can see the 10-armed Durga, the goddess. So these women, they're all very modern, scientifically trained, where they have been living in the Western world. And here they are gaining their power, their strength, and their energy by worshipping and by embodying Durga, the mother goddess. So, and also I just would leave you with another very interesting, it is not just the Indian diaspora. There is a very inspirational speaker, a writer, and an entrepreneur. She is of Ukrainian origin. She just wrote a book called Life in a Cup. So, and in this book she talks about...
What's her name?
The name of the book is Life in a Cup. I'm just forgetting her name. So I'll give it to you after the talk. So Life in a Cup, if you just check it out. And this woman, she has become a multimillionaire. Her tea, she's a tea entrepreneur. She's entrepreneur of tea bags. So here she is, through her book, through her blog, she is emphasizing, she is promoting that she gets her strength, her energy, her knowledge from the goddess Lakshmi. Lakshmi, the 4-armed mother goddess, who is the name of Lakshmi simply means goal, strength, empowerment, good fortune, energy. So here she is depicting, she is kind of displaying that how Lakshmi is her role model. And when she is trying to empower, when she is empowering or talking to the audience, here she is bringing Lakshmi. She is saying, please make a sacred space for Lakshmi in order to be empowered by her. So today we have come a long way since the 19th century. Now we anthropologists are more interested in kind of looking at that, not that whether there is a separation between magic and religion, rather to see that how this dichotomy has been constructed, to deconstruct it and to see how people at the same time they may be scientific and also religious and magical. Thank you so much.